Section 4, once more, the big idea is that the legislative branch, Congress, has the power to make laws. And today we're going to look at how that happens. So, a few different terms we'll use. Cloture is my favorite, to shut kids up. Hey, I'm going to vote for cloture, and then that means that discussion on a topic has so if ever you want to segue, just move for cloture. Now, the first thing is, do you think special interest groups should be allowed to influence Congress? Because this, oh my gosh, this is another frustrating part of politics. Okay, so there's competing interest. There is a strong pro-gun lobby, obviously. There's also a strong anti-gun lobby. And there's moderates in between. Some just say, let's not do bazookas. Come on, guys. Or et cetera, et cetera. And there are lobbyists who represent an interest. That's called a special interest group. The NRA is a special interest group. And they have, as you can imagine, a strong influence on Congress. To the point that during Ted Cruz's election, he videoed himself firing a fully automatic weapon while cooking bacon on the barrel because he, again, wanted to be associated with the pro-gun movement. And so politicians are running on issues that would influence these special interest groups. So Congress considers several different types of legislation each year. Most of these are bills. So, like we saw with the song, how a bill becomes a law, only a small percent of the bills introduced actually ever make it to even the floor, let alone become law. What are these types of bills? There are private ones. These affect the private concerns of people or places. Jamie's bumping Bieber down Henderson would be absolutely a private concern. And my keeping homes from being built off the Green River because I like my pretty river the way it is, that's a private concern ultimately. But it benefits a public good because I'm not the only one that uses it. Now, a public concern would affect a greater number of people or even the nation in general for a federal. So, a joint resolution is a resolution that is passed by both houses of Congress. So, in order for a bill to become a law, it has to go through both houses. And then it can be signed by the president, or the president may not choose to sign it. And then it gets even more complicated. So, what types of bills are most important to consider? It depends. But if it, I'll tell you, it's a really good sign that a bill might become a law if it's become a joint resolution. That is, if it's made it through both houses. Okay, so you got a bill that is a special interest group or an individual brought up a concern to a lawmaker. And now that lawmaker has chosen to sponsor that bill. How does that look? How does that work? So first off, the bill must be introduced. So let's say that when we Skype with Congressman Meadows, he asks you guys, hey, do you have any questions for me? And let's say that Alyssa asked this really brilliant question. And he says, you know what? I've been thinking about that too. You know what? We should do something about that. In fact, would you like to come work for me and help me draft this bill? Congratulations. You've gotten a big summer job. That's big time. And so she might become an assistant to the congressman and draft this bill. And to help sell the idea as a grassroots movement, we're going to invite Alyssa to come speak in front of the House of Representatives. It's a really big deal. Anyway, so it's introduced. It first has to go through committee. And again, it can come from a private citizen like Alyssa, or it could also come from a special interest group. For example, say the NCAE, the North Carolina Association of Educators. If they approach The state legislature, which they have multiple times, which they did in the spring, and they said, teachers need more money, thank you, or we're going on strike. And Congress had to consider that. And part of the job of Congress is passing the budget. And so they passed a budget that allowed for teachers to get a raise. We still got work to do on that, but it was pretty great. Now I can pay for child care and so forth. Yeah, so special interest groups can influence this. These bills that are introduced. So it's not just like, Meadows says, hey, Alyssa, that's a brilliant idea. Let's go talk to all of Congress. No, not so fast. It could still take a year or more, even if it's a great idea that everybody agrees with. So these are introduced to standing committees. They could choose to pass the bill. Yay! Maybe the standing committee says, hey, this is a great idea, Alyssa. We're gonna support this. Woo! They could also, and here's where it gets really messy. They could mark up the bill with changes. They could say, we really like your idea about requiring homeowners to dispose of toxic waste in a safe and environmentally sustainable way. But we also understand that to enforce this law, it would cause a breach of people's rights to privacy. So we're going to change a small aspect of this law to make it comply with the Constitution. Alyssa's going to say, why can't you just go onto their land and stop them polluting? Because that affects me. Well, then they say, well, it's not that simple. Okay, so they're going to change it. She's going to have to live with that, or her idea is done. They can also replace the original bill. They could just say, you know what, Alyssa, that's a great idea, but it's not going to work. But we have this other concept of how we're going to apply this to corporations. We're going to apply this to public lands, but since we can't enforce it on private lands, okay. So we're replacing the bill with one that affects only public lands. So you can't dump toxic waste in Pisgah National Forest. We can police that because we're not affecting anyone's privacy rights. They can ignore the bill. They could totally ghost poor Alyssa. I'm sorry, but they can't. And they have the right to. Meaning that she starts sending them emails. I haven't heard back from you guys, just wanted to follow up. Replies to the sent email. Haven't heard back from you guys, wanted to follow up. Calls the voicemail. Has it on speed dial. The receptionist knows Alyssa. Yes, I'll pass on your message, thank you. And then finally they can kill the bill.
Well.
Yeah. I know it sounds violent, right? Well, they can just say no.
Well.
And they don't have to give a specific reason. However, how they choose to vote on this issue is a matter of public record. And once more, how a legislature votes affects whether or not I will vote for them. You have absolutely the right to check every decision that every legislature has made and allow that to influence your decision to vote. You absolutely have that right. And they understand that people have that right and exercise that right. So, if the bill is passed, so it's gone to the committee, yay, we like the idea, we love the idea. Well, now it's sent to the floor for debate. So now it goes before Congress in that big fancy room that we all get to go sit in. And that's where, the fancy speeches happen. That's where the televised event might occur. The discussions on the bill, if it's something exciting, might make the news. That's where, Alyssa, brush up your speech-making skills. You've now got to address the nation on live television. Good luck with that, right? Don't be nervous. It's cool. We'll run it through, turn it in. Anyway, the Rules Committee then decides which bills go in and in what order to the floor. And they can also hold these back. So they might say, look, I feel like a number of people agree on this, but not enough to make it happen. So we're going to hold on to this bill and we're going to reintroduce it after the election. And we'll see if after the election there's enough votes in favor of this bill. An environmental bill tends to be favored by Democrats, and so if the Democrats take North Carolina in the November election, we'll try to reintroduce it then. It's probably not going to happen, so, well, we're just going to hold on to that bill, and maybe someday, right? Well, anyway. But there could be a filibuster. A filibuster is a tactic of defeating a bill in the Senate by talking until the sponsor withdraws it. This is often a tactic used by the minority party. The Democrats have already exercised this right in several instances since the election, and they can stop Congress from operating, and this requires a certain number of votes to exercise cloture. Let's say that Jamie raises his hand to speak. And we're like, yeah, okay, and he's got this brilliant thing to say, and he has the floor. He can exercise that right, and at least if we're following congressional procedure, he could exercise that right until a certain number of people have approved a vote for cloture. So after Jamie's been going on for 10 minutes, everyone's like, cloture, meaning he would actually have to sit down. But it takes a certain number of votes, and so this is a tactic that minority parties can use to stop things from happening. All right, so once more, if 3/5 of the members of Congress approve a vote for cloture. But this is an effective strategy, because if you don't have the majority vote, let's say you have 45% of the vote, well, that's still enough to filibuster, meaning that whatever bill was going to pass with 55% of the vote is now not going to. It's now going to take 3/5. Okay, so voting on a bill. It's passed committee. It's gone to the floor. It passed the House. Yay! Now it has to start the process all over again in the Senate. And has to be passed there in the same method. Okay. There are a couple of standing committees that are important here to know. Number one is the Conference Committee. Its purpose is to create revised bills that are agreeable to both houses. So, in 1849, what happened? Created the San Francisco 49ers. What happened? 1849. Why are they called the 49ers?
Something about mining.
Yes, the gold rush. The gold rush. People just swelled California's population from like 10,000 to 200,000 in the space of 2 years. And suddenly they had more than enough people to apply for statehood. The trick was, though, they wanted to be a free state, a non-slave state. And the South said, if California gets to be a free state, we're going to start killing people. And meanwhile, Stephen Douglas, who was sponsoring the bill, said, oh my gosh, people, so you're telling me if California becomes a free state, you're going to start a civil war. Oh my gosh. Okay. Stephen Douglas was really, he was kind of just trying to make this work. California's going to be a state one way or another. It's going to happen. We don't want people killing each other. So what are we going to do? So he revised the bill, reintroduced it, if memory serves, around 7 different times. He went through this whole process 7 different times. And then finally, the South was like, okay. 8 years later, okay, we won't kill people this time. We can live with whatever this is. And it worked. It was agreeable to both parties. Whew. And then 2 years later, we have a civil war. Go figure. Okay, so we're going to vote on the bill. There's a couple ways this can happen. Number one is a voice vote. That's just a simple one. Let's say let's say we agree to throw a Christmas party in here. Okay, what do we want to eat? Hey, how's pizza sound? Most of you sound like you're cool with pizza. All in favor of pizza? Yay. Any opposed? Yay. Okay, so most people said yay, whatever, we're getting pizza. We can argue about what we want on said pizza later, but okay, simple enough. Pizza's decent, except for Lauren, sorry. It's a voice vote. Most of you like pizza. It's a simple way to do it. Then, there's a standing vote. This is another one that's effective, but there's a purpose behind all of these. In a standing vote, members stand to be counted on a bill. This one can be important where there's a symbolic purpose. Like if memory serves, I think the 13th Amendment was passed by standing vote because those who felt very strongly, I mean, think of Thaddeus Stevens. Thaddeus Stevens was like the leader of the radical Republicans. The 13th Amendment was something that he had worked his entire life to see. He absolutely, I mean, he was almost on his deathbed. He came off of his deathbed to stand and vote. And then he went and died. And he was just very proud of that moment. I mean, he wanted that recorded for posterity. And so once more, that was a standing vote. There could also be a roll call vote. And maybe, you know, 13th Amendment might have also been a roll call. I can't remember. The point is it was a public vote. But a roll call is where the Senate voice their votes in turn. What say you, Mr. Kahn? Yay. What say you, Mr. Vaughn? Nay, you know. And you can say it in your own dramatic way. And, you know, so for example, Andrew Johnson's acquittal hearing after he was impeached and then accused in the Senate, that was a roll call vote. What say you, so-and-so? And then they said not guilty. And there were enough not guilties to get him off the hook. Okay. So the president obviously can veto this. That means if a president vetoes a law, oh boy, here we go again. Now, a lot of this can be expedited. You know, if Congress knows they have X amount of votes and they know the president's going to veto it, they're probably going to wait and get the necessary number of votes to override the veto. And then it can all happen somewhat quickly. You know, at least in legalese, it can happen quickly. Like it will only take a year versus 10. So, the president can exercise veto. They can also do a pocket veto, which is really sneaky. A pocket veto is a president's power to kill a bill if Congress is not in session. All they have to do is not sign it for 10 days. For example, Abraham Lincoln at the end of the Civil War wanted to control Reconstruction. Congress introduced a bill that allowed them to control Reconstruction. Lincoln used the pocket veto to kill the bill, meaning that he just kept it on his desk. Oh yeah, it's in my inbox. Oh yeah, I'll get to it. I'm busy. 10 days later, it wasn't signed. It went away. He was allowed to implement his plan, called the Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction. And Congress's plan is going to be put on the shelf for at least a couple more years until the whole drama with Andrew Johnson. Okay, so finally, both houses of Congress can overturn a veto with a 2/3 vote. The point is, getting a simple majority is hard enough. Getting a supermajority, good luck with that. Okay, so, you know, in terms of introducing legislation to Congress, the irony here is that, you know, Congress does introduce these things, but in some ways all of these groups can introduce them.